This is the Budget in Bites.
Money talks.
Everybody, if you are here for a regular old boring meeting about the city's budget, you are in the wrong place because we're going to have some fun tonight. We're going to have fun teaching you about the city's budget process and how you can get involved. This evening we are live on Facebook, so hi everybody out there on Facebook. We're also on YouTube and on the City channel. If you are watching us on Facebook Live, feel free to ask us any questions. We do have Zach, you can't see him, he's off camera, but he'll be answering your questions this evening. I have Tony up here with me who will be presenting with me this evening. I also have Thomas and Richard, can't see them either, but I promise they're here, and they're going to be answering questions live in person. If you do have any questions, we're going to try to save those till the end. We're hoping we can answer the bulk of your questions as we go through our presentation. And there are index cards and pens at your tables if you have any questions, and staff will come around and pick them up throughout the presentation. First, we're going to go over a little bit of logistics. If you are here and in the room, there is food in the back, including the Budget is My Cup of Tea boba bar. So feel free to get up and grab food, come back and sit down as we're presenting. We also have Eric here from OpenGov, and we're going to cover a couple of the softwares that we have with OpenGov that really lend to our transparency here in the city of Cupertino. The restrooms, if you're in here in person, are right out that door and on your right-hand side. We're going to go ahead and get started kind of into the presentation. We're going to go over Budget 101 first, which is everything you always wanted to know about budget but did not know you wanted to know. And then we're going to go through and take that information that we just taught you, and you're going to do a practical example and balance your own general fund budget. We're going to go over the budget calendar, which are important dates that are coming up that can tell you when you can come get involved in the budget process, and also things to look out for. We're going to do a short survey because budget people are numbers people, we're data people, and anytime we can crunch additional numbers, we jump at the opportunity. So we're hoping to get some feedback from you this evening, not only on the presentation this evening, but if you've been following us on social media, what you thought of our social media takeover. And lastly, we're going to do a scavenger hunt. Don't worry, you're not going to need to get up out of your chairs. You're going to take some of the information we've given you here. If you've been following us on social media, you'll also have some of the answers as well. And we do have prizes, so please stick around for our scavenger hunt. So we're going to get right into Budget 101. If you're ever at a council meeting and you hear us present the budget, or you pick up one of our budget books or a budget at a glance, you may see these terminology that you're not that familiar with. So we're going to walk you through some of those terms this evening. The first is fiscal year. So everybody knows what a calendar year is, right? Well, fiscal year is what we actually use to track our budget. We begin the fiscal year on July 1st of a year and we end it on June 30th, which means we cover 2 calendar years. So you'll hear us refer to fiscal year. So the current fiscal year we're in is 18-19, or we also refer to it as fiscal year 19, so the year that it ends in. So our fiscal year will end on June 30th, 2019, and then we'll start fiscal year 19-20. Next, we're going to talk about revenue, and revenue is really the money that's coming into the city, so dollars being received in the city. We'll talk about appropriation, so this is a bit of a tricky one, but I promise I'm going to walk you through it. So appropriation is what we said we were going to spend the money on. What did we budget the money on? That's different than the expenditure. That means what did we actually spend it on? So a budget is an appropriation is what did we think we were going to spend it on? What did we set it aside for? Expenditure or expense is what we actually spent it for. Again, more on commonly used terms. We're going to talk about fund balance. And fund balance, you can see the cute little picture of the little piggy bank on top of a pile of money, is the city's savings account. We're going to go a little bit into more detail about how that works, how money comes into it, how money gets out of it, but in general, it's a city savings account. A carryover. So a carryover is, in budget terms, at the end of the year, right, the council approved these dollars to do specific things. If, let's say, we didn't get to finish a project, but we know we're going to continue it into the next year, we can carry those funds over into the next fiscal year. But here's the caveat. If I want to use that money for something different than what the council said I could use it for, I could not carry that money over. I had to go back to council and ask them for the authority to spend it in the new year. But if it's for the same purpose they already approved, I can carry those funds over. Last thing we have up here is an encumbrance. An encumbrance happens because we have a contract or some kind of agreement to either purchase or have services from a particular person. Those funds are encumbered, which means we set them aside because we know we have this obligation to pay. At the end of the year, if the obligation is still going to exist into the new year, so let's say we have a contract that spans more than 1 year, we go ahead and take those encumbrances and we bring them forward. And so what the heck does all that mean? It's talking about a carryover or an encumbrance. And so basically why it's important is when you look at our final budget, which is, you actually have them here on your tables, our final budget for the current fiscal year that we're in is really a point in time budget. So we approve it on usually the first or second meeting in June, and it's effective July 1st. But to tell you that truth, that book is outdated by the time we actually print it on July 1st because there's all these different changes that are happening. And so throughout the year, we'll refer to something that we call the legal or the amended budget. And that means we start with the final budget, that's always our starting point. We go ahead and we add any carryovers from the prior year. And then we also go ahead and we add any encumbrances that were left over that need to come over. And lastly, throughout the year, we'd add any council approved adjustments. So if I need to raise the budget, if I need more money, I don't have the authority to do that on my own. I actually have to go to council and ask for more funds. And so if council is approving those additional budget amendments, sometimes it's more, sometimes it's bringing it down, we take all of those together and that becomes our legal budget. And that could mean that our final budget could have been $70 million, but my legal budget could be $85 million when I take into account all of these things that are being carried over. The next thing we talk about a lot is you'll hear us refer to things like funds, and Tony's actually going to go through all the different fund types in the city in just a moment. You hear us refer to departments, and so funds, think of it as kind of big buckets. The bigger overarching budget is the fund, and the reason why fund is important is it tells us how we can use those dollars. Some funds have more restrictions than others. The general fund is the least restricted, and what that means is if, let's say, council wanted to fund a shuttle program, they can do that in the general fund. There's the free reign to do that. In some of our other funds, because of how those dollars are received, and again, Tony will go over this, that may not allow us to do that. Then we go into each department. So within each fund, there could be several different departments. And within those departments, so a department is a functional area. So city council is a good example, right? Everybody knows who the city council is, right? So within the city council budget, there are different divisions. And we're just trying to kind of take the department and bring it down to a level so you can kind of understand what that specific area is paying for. So within the department, we have a division. For city council, we have city council and we have commissions. Within the divisions, then we get into more detail. We get into what is specifically kind of happening. So within commissions, right, it wouldn't really make sense if we just had all the commissions jumbled together. You wouldn't know how much money each commission was spending. So we then take that division and we further break it down to the program. So now we have the general fund, city council, the commissions division, and within that we have sustainability, our teen commission, our housing, all of those are in there. But that still only tells you, if we stop there, you just know maybe that the housing commission is spending $30,000, but you don't know on what, right? So that's when we come down to the account level. And so what we do at the account level is we try to put together expenses that make sense together. So materials, contracts, maybe training, right? And we put all of those expenses together to give you a sense of what we're spending the money on. So maybe you're sitting here and you're thinking, that's great. Love to know all these terminologies, that's awesome, but what does that mean to me as a resident of Cupertino? How do I contribute? If you've been following our social media, we've been covering a lot of different taxes, and you may think to yourself, man, I pay a lot of taxes for a lot of different things, right? How does that contribute to the city? So we're gonna focus tonight on the general fund, at least for this piece, because that is really where our residents, and actually not only residents, people visiting our city, employees such as myself who don't live in Cupertino, but I work here, I help contribute to the economy here in Cupertino as well, because anybody visiting our city pays into sales tax, right? If they're buying something in the city, they're helping to contribute. We're going to talk a little bit about how that money comes into the city, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how we spend those dollars. We're going to go over only the top 3 funding sources for the general fund this evening, and that's because this is a short meeting and we don't really want to take up all the time talking about smaller revenue sources. And really these sources we're going to talk about today have the most impact, we feel, to the residents, where they kind of can contribute more. So the first we're going to cover is sales tax. Then we're going to cover property tax, and then transient occupancy tax, which is TOT. And that will cover about 60% of the revenues in the general fund. And we're going to walk you through examples that kind of hopefully make it relevant for you. Again, if you've been following us on social media, you've seen some of these examples already. So sales tax. So you go to the store, you buy something, you know, it's $10, but you don't pay $10, you pay $10.09, right? That 9 cents, that's sales tax. So when we look in Cupertino, again, the tax rate is 9% or 9 cents of every taxable dollar. But of that 9 cents, the city only receives 1 cent, or about 11%, right? And so what does that mean? That means if I spent $100 in taxable goods or services here in Cupertino, again, not everything is taxable, I would get taxed $9. Of that $9, only $1 would come back to the city. And so when we take these numbers, this concept, and we apply it against what we had estimated in our final budget for sales tax, we estimated for the current fiscal year as part of the final budget, about $2.4 billion in taxable sales here in Cupertino. So we're starting with $2.4 billion. But you're only getting taxed 9%. So that number comes down to $213 million. And of that, the city's only getting 1 cent or 11% of that, which means $23.6 million being received by the city of Cupertino. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the city's population and we're just going to take a per capita of that. Again, I want to touch on, it's not only residents in the city spending money, that is a big portion of it, but it's also, again, people that are visiting the city, whether they're here going to DeAnza or they're here working at Apple Park or at Whole Foods, wherever it is, they also help bring in dollars to the city. But this is just a practical example because it'd be really hard to capture how many people are actually contributing. So when we do that, we go ahead and we see that the city is receiving about $369 annually when you take a per capita. So remember that because we're going to come back to that $369. The next thing we're going to cover is property tax. And the property tax is actually very specific. If you own a home in Cupertino, you're paying property tax. And in general, the way that works is the assessor's office, which is part of the county, gives an assessed value of your home. Based on that assessed value, in general, you're taxed 1%. You may have other kind of add-on taxes, but in general, the value of your home, they take 1% of that, and that's your tax rate. The city then gets 6.72% of that 1%, which means if you have a home valued at, let's say, $2.178 million, and this was the median sale price, I think, back when we put this chart together at the beginning of the fiscal year, so in July, and you're taxed 1%, $21,780, but the city only receives $1,464 annually. So you have the $369, you have the $1,464. That's a total of $1,833. Kind of the straw person we've created is contributing to the city's general fund, which is all good and well, right? But people want to know, how are we spending the money? Where are my dollars going to? In the chart I'm about to show you, big caveat here is we've taken departments such as planning and community development and even rec and public works that receive fees, and we back out those fees. So this is net of any additional dollars coming in. This is really the cost that the general fund is paying for. And so when we look at that, we have councils and commissions at $16 annually. That's a pretty good deal, I think. We have administration, which is our city manager's office, our sustainability, our public affairs, coming in at $152. This also includes our city attorney's office. Then we have administrative services, which is the budget staff you see here today. We're in charge of really the financial reporting for the city. We oversee human resources. We make sure our employees get paid and our bills get paid as well, coming in at $52 annually. Innovation and technology at $108, so that makes sure we have our laptops that are functional, or we have phones or any technology that we need to be able to do city operations. Then we have our recreation and community services department, which basically takes care of all the fun events you see here in the city. So if anybody's going to Big Bunny this weekend, or if you've done the 4th of July, or any of the events out here at Memorial Park, or any of the other parks in the city, that's what's funding those costs. You have community development, so this is if you're going to go to pull up any kind of permit, building permit, planning permit, trying to add an addition or something to your house, you're going to come here to this division and they're going to assist you. Then we have our law enforcement, and our law enforcement is really, it's actually provided through Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office through a contract, and so we pay $355 annually for that contract. And then we have our public works department. And this is really the biggest department in the city. And they take care of a lot of things that you see out here. So they take care of all of the grounds at all of our parks. They take care of our streets, our sidewalks, our medians, our lights. I mean, really all the major items that you see throughout the city. Public Works is out there servicing those for you. And then we have transfers out to other funds. So Tony's going to go over a little bit the different fund types, and we have some funds that, with the fees they collect, are not sufficient to cover the operation of that particular function. And so what happens when they don't collect enough? So that means the general fund subsidizes them, which means the general fund will go ahead and move over from the general fund, take it and transfer it out to make them whole. And that's what the transfer out to other funds are. Then we have our debt service for our library, and we're going to break this out by library and community center, community hall. So you'll be spending about $55 toward the library debt service. We're going to go over debt service as well, so if you have any questions on that, that will be coming up on a slide. I think it's a good point. I mean, people come in here at the end. If you have any questions, we do have index cards on your desks, on your tables in front of you. Feel free to write down any questions, and then just kind of lift your hand up, and staff will come over and grab the card. And that's the way we'll be taking questions this evening. And anything we don't cover in the presentation, we'll take care of at the end of the presentation. So just a quick announcement there. And on to the last one. So I mentioned we also have in here debt service related to our community hall / council chambers. This is the same building, but used for two different purposes. So transient occupancy tax was the last tax I said I was going to talk to you about. And the reason why I have it after the big donut chart here is that generally as a resident, you're not paying this tax. Someone's visiting you from out of town and they're staying in a hotel or they're renting an Airbnb, they're paying this tax. And really the way this tax works is if you stay in a hotel and based on the rate that you're paying that evening, you're going to get taxed 12%. So if we go ahead and take the average daily room rate, which means kind of on average what hotels are charging here in Cupertino, and we apply that to a 4-night stay, so that's $240. So per night, we're getting $29, so that's 12% of the $240. Over a 4-night stay, we get $116. And what's important about this is when I talked about sales tax, I said we only get a portion of this. I talked about property tax, we only get a portion of that. We get to keep the full 12% here in Cupertino. So that's kind of an important one and a little bit why it's different. So as promised, we said we were going to talk about fund balance. So fund balance is a city savings account. And if you're looking into the budget book and you're looking at fund balance, you're going, wow, the city's got some healthy fund balance. And you'd be right, we do. But not all of that can be used. There's restrictions put on some of those dollars. So we're going to walk you through what that might look like. So if we look at revenue, so let's say we had 7 revenue blocks. And my block example is because I have small children, and this is how I explain a lot of their Common Core math that I got to do at home. So I have seven revenue blocks. I have 5 expenditure blocks, which means what? I've brought in more money than I've spent by 2 blocks. And so what happens to those 2 blocks at the end of the year? They go into my fund balance. They go into my savings account. But what about if next year I only bring in 5 blocks of revenue and I'm spending 7 blocks. That means now I'm short 7 blocks. The only way I'm going to be able to fix this gap, I mean, I guess I could take a loan, but that's probably not going to work for a city. Maybe we get a donation and that might cover it. That would be great. But in reality, the only place I can go grab from if I have a shortfall is my fund balance. And so what I do is in a year where this is happening, I come in and I grab my fund balance, and that's how I balance my budget. So if you ever read any of our documents, you may see something like the budget is $108 million, and it's funded by $80 million in revenue and $22 million in one-time funds or fund balance. This is generally what we're talking about here. But again, we talked about, so we look at all the blocks we have in fund balance. So year after year, we're either building or we're taking away from fund balance, depending on what happens at the end of the year. Here in Cupertino, we're generally building on that fund balance. And so we have a pretty good amount. However, again, I mentioned we can't actually spend all of that dollars. So they're classified into different categories. The first category is non-spendable, and you're probably thinking, what the heck does that mean, non-spendable? So think of this as like a loan receivable, which means somebody owes us money. They haven't paid us that money, and so because we don't have it, we can't spend it. It's not in a spendable form. And we have restricted. And restricted means somebody outside of the city has put restrictions on dollars and how we can spend them. And so the reason, I don't know if you can see the picture up there, but it's actually Wayne's World. If anybody's familiar with the movie Wayne's World, they had a show on public access television. And so this is actually one of the categories we have here in Cupertino, public access television. These dollars are restricted. They can only be used toward public access TV type equipment. So the cameras behind you over there that are filming us this evening, we could use those funds for things like that. But the restriction is not something council put on us or that staff put on ourselves. It's something somebody from the outside has said, you can only spend these dollars in this way. So it's restricted. Then we get to committed. And committed, this is done at our highest level, a level of government for the city. And for us, approval level, that's our city council. So city council can say, hey, I want this money specifically set aside for this purpose. When council is the one telling us we need to do that, that goes into the committed side. And then we have assigned. And assigned is generally done, staff will set aside dollars like a rainy day fund. We actually in Cupertino have an economic uncertainty fund. So should revenues fall short or should our expenses go over, we would pull from this rainy day fund. And so what that means is after when we started with all of these blocks, we really have 3 blocks left of unrestricted fund balance. And what does that mean? That means that's money we can spend. That's money we can spend on different items, but caveat, one-time things. And the reason we spend these dollars on one-time things is they're one-time dollars. So we don't want to take this money and fund something that's going to cost us money going over many years that we're going to need year after year. Otherwise, that could put us in a structural deficit situation. And right now, the city actually has a policy that says any excess fund balance, unrestricted category, as long as we have all the other fund balances covered, the bulk of that, absent $500,000, will get transferred into our capital reserve, which helps pay for different capital projects throughout the city. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tony. She's going to walk you over through some of our different funds we have here in the city.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Christina. So now that you all have an overview of basic budget terminology, the next thing that we're going to cover, we're going to introduce you to the different type of funds that the city has. So with that, let's talk about what fund accounting is. So fund accounting is a type of accounting that focuses, that governments and nonprofits use. Focuses more on accountability rather than profitability. So say for example, traditional businesses, they focus more on how they make their money. But here in government, we're interested more in making sure that the money that we have, that we receive, and we spend are all allocated for the proper reasons, as shown as some of these examples here. So for tax-supported funds, these are generally unrestricted funds. And the general fund and the capital improvement fund, these are types of tax-supported. These are examples of tax-supported funds. The revenues are derived primarily from property taxes and sales taxes. And as Christina had mentioned earlier, the general fund is the city's largest fund. And it goes to fund our core services such as law enforcement, recreation events, community development, city streets, as well as trees. Now our capital funds are used for the acquisition of or construction of major capital facilities. Some of our capital projects include enhancements to the Environmental Educational Center, the De Anza Median upgrade, and the Sports Center LED sign. Another type of fund that the city has are known as special revenue funds. These are very different from the general revenue funds. These are legally restricted for specific expenditures. As Christina mentioned earlier, say if council wanted to use these funds for a particular project, we're not able to do so unless they are used for its intended original purpose. They are legally restricted for specific expenditures. So for example, when you go to pump gas, the city gets a portion of the taxes collected on this. And with SB 1, which is also known as the Road Repair and Accountability Act of 2017, these revenues must be used for improving road safety, improving things such as filling potholes, repairing local streets. As shown in this example here, the city of Cupertino had repaired this and actually put a sign here showing that your tax dollars are put to work. And if you drive around the city of Cupertino, you'll notice that the sign is placed in several different areas, as well as throughout the state of California. Another type of fund that Christina briefly mentioned are your debt service type of funds. When an agency issues debt, it'll create a debt service fund to account for these debt payments. These are funded primarily by our general fund revenues. And for an example, the city has issued debt for construction of the facilities, the Cupertino Library and Community Hall. Through this debt service fund, the city is able to make payments to the lessor. The current annual debt is about $3.2 million, and it's expected to be paid off July 1st, 2030. And another type of fund are known as the enterprise funds. So these are your funds that operate like a business or providing goods or services to the public. So how many people here are members of the city's sports center, for example? Great. So these funds are funded directly by fees for charged goods or services. So when you pay for a sports membership, for example, those funds go directly into funding things like the sports equipment that you're able to use at the sports center. Now, how many of you here have ever been or played around a golf at the Blackberry Farm golf course? Okay, great. So here's an example. It shows you what the rates are, the current rates at the golf course there. So those funds go directly into things like maintaining the golf course, where we can find Tiger Woods winning the Masters. Another type of fund is known as the internal service fund. So these operate like a business, however, between departments. So in a way, we are charging each other, departments are charging each other for the services. An example here is, say we have a City of Cupertino vehicle equipment fund, and they budget in that fund $100,000 for 100 cars. Now the building division, they just need 5 of those cars for their building inspectors to go out and inspect all the facilities. So 5 of the 100 cars is what they're gonna owe the Public Works Division, and that comes out to $5,000. So basically the Public Works Department charges the building division $5,000, and they'll pay that back to the Public Works Division. So those are the different types of funds that are in the city. And next, we'll go ahead and cover a general overview of the budget process. So this slide here illustrates the city's budget reporting cycle. We operate on a July 1st to June 30 fiscal year basis, as Christina had mentioned. It's an ongoing process that happens throughout the year. It includes phases such as one is development, then there's the proposals, then there's adoption, and then there's monitoring, and there are also amendments. So on a quarterly basis, staff will bring quarterly reports, their analysis requests to council. And should adjustments be needed that are outside of this quarterly process, staff are able to bring requests or bring reports and requests outside of this cycle. Now, you might be wondering, how can the community get involved in the budget process? You can come to the council meetings. Come to our council meetings. Your voice can be heard there. There's budget items going before council, and you have an opportunity there to speak about, give your opinion on things that should be funded or things that should not be funded. In a few slides, we'll be going over the different dates that you can get involved. Also, you can get involved by going online and using our OpenGov platforms. Christina will be showing a demo of the detailed information that you can get regarding the city's budget using our software. So once the budget is adopted, the final budget document, as you can see, everybody has one on their table. It looks like this. And I wanted to just kind of cover a general overview of what some of the budget sections, what's covered in each of these sections. Now the budget message is the first thing here. It's a very high-level overview of the city's budget and summarizes current and long-term financial position. There's also some notable accomplishments, some new initiatives in there. Again, high-level overview of the city's budget. Now the budget guide, these are going to have tools to assist reader with different terminology. So I know Christina had gone over a lot of the basic budgeting terminology. If you forget, you can always refer back to this guide. And there's a lot more definitions there as well. The community profile, you'll find some historical and current information about the city of Cupertino. And in financial policies, you can find projected revenues, expenditures, information on fund balances or reserves, so forecasts and everything like that. A lot of good detailed information on the city's budget. Now, say you want to go ahead and dive into things like a specific department. So you want to look at council and commissions, you want to look at law enforcement, you want to look at IT. You can find those, the detailed information on each of those tabs. And in there, you'll find things such as each department's specific revenues, expenditures, their program overview, their service objectives, amount of staff, and things like that. Oh, and just so you know, so in case you don't have a copy of the budget document at home, you can find one at City Hall, you can find one at the Cupertino Library, you can also find it online as well. And online you can find it as a document as a whole that you're able to look through it that way, or it's also broken out by sections. So if you're interested in a particular section, you can look at our budget document online and have access to all the information there as well.
Okay, so as promised, we're going to go over just really quickly. We want to show you kind of how you can, if you're like, hey, I really want to read the book, but there's specific things that I want to know. How can I go find those things without doing a deep dive? I want to look at some numbers or specific things. And a good place to go is our city's transparency portal, which is software through OpenGov. And so in this example, we're going to go through and kind of show you the basics of the portal, but we're also going to show you kind of what we think might be kind of a practical example of what you might want to look for, right? So right here in our landing page, you'll see that kind of shows you here, this is actually showing you our revenues as of mid-year. If you click all the way over to the, if you see all the way over to the left side, I'm trying to get the clicker here. Can you guys see that red light? Okay. So over here to the left side are kind of the different buckets that you have to go look at. So when we did our mid-year financial presentation, we used reports from this portal, and we went ahead and saved those here. So if you're watching that on TV, or you were in person watching it, and you're like, hey, I want to dig a little deeper into those charts, you could come here and see those charts. We also have annual actuals, which means on an annual basis, what is the actual dollars that were spent. We have our annual budget, again, annual basis, what did we think we were going to spend, or dollars received. We also have an area where you can look at what did we think we were going to spend and receive, and what did we actually do, and that puts them right next to each other. And then we have our monthly actuals. This actually gets updated on a daily basis. So you can see up here, April 17th was when it was updated. So let's say if we're looking at this example and you're thinking to yourself, heck, I'd really like to know how much we've spent on law enforcement services over the last 9 years, right? Maybe you want to know that. So the way you would do that is you would come in here and you would go ahead and go to the general fund by department. So if you scroll down, Thomas already got us there, but there's actually a saved view here that says general fund expenses by department. So that'd be a really good starting point. From there, you can see we have the departments listed on your left-hand side. You can access the law enforcement department by either clicking on the purple dot here, or you could actually even click into the purple section of the bar chart before you. So let's go ahead and click in there. And when we look at that, we see that, hey, there's different categories, right? We have law enforcement, code enforcement, another law enforcement, and an inoperability. Well, we're really looking for the law enforcement contract, and that's the biggest line up there on top. So let's say we go ahead and click on that. And this is great. It tells me how much money I've spent on law enforcement, right? But what if there's other things in there? So earlier we talked about, right, it could give me a big number, but if I'm specifically interested in the contract, right, I would want to change this view a little bit. So you can start here with a saved view, but then you can filter that view once you kind of get to a point where you need a little bit more. So here, if we go ahead and click on the filters, right now it's showing me that I'm showing my expenses. I have it broken down by departments. Well, what if I don't want to break it down by department now? I want to break it down by expense type. I just go ahead and hit that pull down screen, and I break it down by expense type. And now all of a sudden I can see the contract service line, the materials and supplies, and our cost allocation. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and click contract services. And this gives you a view, historically, of what we spent on our law enforcement contract. You'll see 1819 is a little low. That's because we continue to update this. Once the fiscal year closes, you'll have that full bar up to where it is. And the neat thing about this is if you scroll down, so that gives it to you in bar form, but if you actually want to see the data, it's down here as well. You actually want to see the numbers, and if we scroll all the way back up, you can share this chart. You can share it on social media, you can email it to somebody, you can email it to the budget team and say, hey, I have questions on this, right? And so you can see here where you just go here, or you can just download the image or the spreadsheet on its own. So depending on maybe some information you want to know, you might actually be able to go here, more than likely, and kind of data mine yourself by just clicking and getting to that information. So we think that's pretty cool. We think that's pretty transparent, and so that's why you'll hear us talk about this tool a lot. We'd actually love for residents to go use it, try it out. Again, we have Eric here with OpenGov, so if you have some ideas or questions, he's available. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, if we toggle back to our presentation, is related to our Open City Hall. And so has anybody in here taken an Open City Hall survey? All right, a couple people. Well, you're going to have the opportunity tonight. So if you go to our Open City Hall portal, which is cupertino.org/Open City Hall, the exercise we're going to do this evening in just a few minutes to balance the budget is going to be up on that website. So if you're watching us out there on Facebook Live, don't feel left out once we cut away and go to the exercise, because you can actually hop online and do a very similar exercise with us from home. So currently right now we have our Budget and Bites Balance the Budget in-person version up there. We also have the Budget and Bites online version, which is the one you're going to want to click on if you're at home. But we also have a capital improvement program survey. So everybody, we talked a little bit about capital improvement, so that's kind of what we're going to spend the money on for infrastructure coming forward. If you haven't taken this survey, it's a good time to go click on it. It's 2 questions. We try to make them as simple and straightforward as possible, so we're not going to take up 2 hours of your time taking a survey. We try to make them very short. So I would encourage you to come here from time to time, see what surveys are out there. I think we generally also post them on different social media channels, Nextdoor, things like that, on the city's webpage to let you know. And this is a way for us to we're really trying to solicit information from our residents. You know, what is it that you'd like us to spend the money on? You know, what about our internet speeds? There's different topics. I think there was one on the Parks Master Plan up here not that long ago either. And so just the kind of little good outreach transparency tools that we can use. So with that, we'll come back to the presentation. We'll actually sign off to the folks over on Facebook, YouTube, and the City channel. But we encourage you, the link is in our Facebook post, to go and take that survey. Let us know what you would fund in the city's budget that we're going to have up here. These are not real examples of what we're funding, but they have real life connections to some things that may be in the budget. And with that, again, thank you everybody that's watching us online. We'll go ahead and cut the feed there, and then we're going to walk you through what you're going to do for the exercise. Sound good?